the most powerful figure in fashion.
Anna, right here.
My father really decided for me that I should work in fashion. And he said, well, you want to be editor of Vogue? Of course. So that was it.
And I'll probably rob your mom just to cop some chrome. Word bomb smash in high fashion clothes. I turn local, international, and I'm so focused on holding riches. Never forward, I'ma moat them snitches that told the business. I'm codependent upon my co-defendant. Hide with them cold intentions. Pedal to the flow, pole position like.
Hey, Anna.
Ready?
Hey yo, who having a good time? If your hood like mine, this jam the anthem, throw your hands up. Who having a good time? If your hood like mine, this jam the anthem, throw your hands up.
That's popular. Okay, here she is. Here she is, my friend, my colleague, ex-colleague.
Tina, thank you so much
Good
for
to
having
have
me.
you, Anna,
Thank
at
you for
last.
having me.
So the Met Gala, it's only like, what, 4 weeks away?
2.5.
2.5 weeks. Oh, my
Yes.
God. So Vogue must be in full war room mode. What's
We-
happening back there, and what are we going to see?
We are. The theme of the Met this year is Camp, Notes on Fashion, and it's based on the Susan Sontag essay, Notes on Camp. And it really examines the camp aesthetic, starting with the court of Louis XIV, moving through the Oscar Wilde period, to the current influence of camp on modern designers. So we're going from Sun Kings to drag queens, and there is a lot of discussion in the halls of Vogue and the halls of the museum about what our guests are going to wear. And whether
You're going to be in a riot of feathers, is this what we're told?
I haven't decided yet, Tina.
It sounds very
I have
Bjork.
I have options. I have options, but what I'm really hoping is that someone will arrive in hiking boots and a backpack.
Yeah, I hope that too. So this must be a little less stressful, I would think, than last year's theme, which was Heavenly Bodies, which was the Vatican and the whole Catholic Church.
Yes.
I can't imagine what wrangling that was like.
Well, it was not so much wrangling as having to go frequently to the Vatican, because the Vatican, as you may well know, do not believe in email. I think they send messages by pigeon. And so,
or smoke signals.
So
right?
Andrew Bolton and I, who is the curator in charge of the Costume Institute at the Met, had to make many, many visits to the Vatican to negotiate the loans and the whole concept of the museum. We met many maestros, many cardinals, many fathers. We learned a lot about the many intrigues at the Vatican, but just about this time, maybe a little bit earlier last year, I had very much wanted the Vatican choir to sing at the Met, and His Holiness had agreed. But then we got a call to say that, unfortunately, His Holiness had changed his mind, and the Vatican choir had to work on their homework, and they would not be able to come to the Met to perform. So we went into complete panic, and we were able to find a wonderful alternate, which was Madonna, and then,
yeah, take that, you know, Pope Francis.
2 days before the Met, or 3 days before, His Holiness changed his mind. So then we had not only Madonna, we also had the Vatican choir and the maestro. So we ran through the museum, listening to all these wonderful entertainments. And the Vatican choir were absolutely perfect, immaculate, so well behaved, even though they were sitting in the American wing with Rihanna there and George Clooney and Amal Clooney. They were perfectly behaved. And then the minute they finished their performance, which was fantastic, they leapt up and it was selfie heaven. But Then they went back to the Vatican, and we learned that there was a lot of displeasure on the part of the Vatican on their behavior, and that the maestro himself had been let go.
Oh my God, wow.
I think there was also an element of possible corruption on the part of the maestro. So it was a very...
This is unbelievable.
It was
Backstage.
a very... backstage at the Vatican is...
It's like the next episode of Dirty Money on Netflix.
Interesting.
So, of course, the gala is happening now at a time when you just got a new CEO, right? I mean, he's called Roger Lynch at Condé Nast. He's come in. It's like the first kind of big outside sort of CEO that has come in, really. He's the former CEO of Pandora. Got deep experience in videos and TV, but none in publishing. So you're the artistic director of Condé Nast. I mean, what advice are you giving your new CEO?
Well, he hasn't actually started yet. He came in last week and met everybody. He seemed like a very dynamic person, very straightforward, very charismatic and eager to learn and to, obviously, since he's going to be a global CEO, our first, Tina, is very different from our days on Times Square, Madison Avenue. And so he's going to, I think, go on a listening tour and go to all our different territories, Russia, China, everywhere that over the world that we have offices. And obviously he'll come back with a strategy that we're all looking forward to hearing. But he was very impressive, and I think talked a lot about opportunities and learning from mistakes. And, you know, I think we're all very, very excited.
Excited, yeah. Well, you've really been the queen of American fashion now for 3 decades. I'm not going to say the years, I'll say 3 decades.
Maybe right. 200.
And you and I arrived at Condé Nast, within a few years of each other in the 80s, when I was editor of Vanity Fair, of course, and you went to Vogue, working first for Grace Mirabella before you became editor-in-chief. And in those days, it was really a bit like the court of Louis XIV. Everything revolved around the Sun King, the chairman's side new house.
Right.
And now it's this totally different world. I mean, for you who stayed on, and saw all these different evolutions at Condé Nast, what are the biggest changes that you've seen as editor?
Well, audiences, Tina. Yeah. I mean, I think if you go back even further, when you and I were both working in London, and we felt very excited if we reached an audience of 50,000 at Tatler, 100,000 at Vogue. It was minuscule, and that was a good day. And now we have all these opportunities to talk to our audiences, in the millions by all these different channels, whether it's coming to a fascinating conference like this one, or doing an event like the Met, or through social media, whatever it may be. I mean, our reach is just so much more enormous, and it's how you use those different avenues to talk to your audiences that, to me, is the biggest change and the most fascinating change.
Right. I see that. But through it all, of course, Vogue has always been chronicling and celebrating women leaders, actually. And you're known as a very sort of forthright and supportive leader, very decisive. Who are your leading role models? I mean, who have you sort of watched to see as a great model for leading, and how have you grown into that
many,
role?
but obviously most recently I have been so impressed and inspired by the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Yeah.
I think when we look at...
Yeah, I feel the same, absolutely.
I think when we look at the terrifying issues that we have in this country, and obviously many other countries, on gun control, and how brilliantly and directly and emotionally she dealt with the tragedy in New Zealand, and how swiftly they moved to correct the situation. Right. And it is astonishing to me that we cannot pass the simplest correction in this country. I just think it's appalling. So right now, if you're going to ask me,
Jacinda,
I wish you'd come and run this country.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But for yourself as a leader, I mean, you're very decisive. I mean, who have you personally, patterned yourself on a little bit as a manager, as a leader? Is there anybody that you admire tremendously?
Well, I obviously. Growing up, I was inspired by my dad, Tina, as and probably your husband, as great decisive leaders. And I think the most important thing is to have clarity. I think the people who work for you, they want to know where they stand, what the decision is being made, and how they can execute it. I think when people waffle or indecisive, that's incredibly frustrating for the people that work for you. And then obviously I was also so inspired by Catherine Graham, whom I saw really as a figure who represented women through the last century, starting off her life really as, even though it was a very privileged life, as a wife and a mother, and then going into the workforce and leading that media business and making
the Washington Post, married to her husband, died.
Very, very tough and fearless decisions.
Yeah, she certainly was. Of course, I knew your father, who I admired enormously, and actually I had once a rather chilly interview with him as editor of the Evening Standard, where I was trying to...
he was famous for those.
Yeah, make a number with him. Your mother you don't talk about a lot. What sort of influence was your mother on you?
Well, she started off, she met my dad at Cambridge, and she actually started off a career as a film critic, and then she had 4 children, and when she went back to work, she decided that she wanted to work in social issues, and she helped take care of teenage mothers and their children, and help place the children, if necessary, in adoption homes, and kept in contact with the mothers and the foster homes. And that was, a very important work to her, and I think very inspiring to all of us. And I think both of them in many ways were a deep inspiration to me. And I just have to tell you one story about an interview that I like to tell about my dad. I mean, there's a famous English playwright called Tom Stoppard, and he came down from Bristol, where he had studied, I believe, politics, to interview with my dad for a job on the political desk. So they had a little talk, and he said, well, so could you tell me, Tom, or Mr. Stoppard, probably he would have said at that time, could you tell me, Mr. Stoppard, the name of the Home Secretary? And there was a long silence, and Tom answered, well, I said I was interested in politics. I didn't say I was obsessed with them. So as a result, he did not get the job.
I think that's hysterical. Obviously, one of the big changes we've seen recently in the whole culture, fashion, the world in general, is the explosion of the Me Too movement, right? And, that's been a big reckoning for a lot of industries, including in fashion.
Yes.
And you've moved on that.
Yes.
So, I mean, how did that hit Vogue, and how did that, was that a kind of deeply troubling time for you?
Yeah, I think that we were as shocked and disturbed as so many industries were, and we moved very quickly to update our global code of conduct. We interviewed hundreds of people that go on shoots or are involved within the company in many different ways, in and outside of the company, and we revised our guidelines. We made it very clear that any kind of disrespectful or upsetting behavior would in no way be tolerated. We put in place a hotline for anyone who wanted to call in things that were untoward that were happening either in the office or on shoots. And we made the very, very difficult decision to stop working with a number of photographers that were under investigation for sexual harassment. And these were photographers that were not only long-term collaborators, brilliant collaborators, and colleagues at Condé Nast throughout the world, and very important to the voice of many of our titles, but also personal friends. And that has been a very, very tough decision, but absolutely no question that it was the right one to make.
And you've been very supportive of Harvey Weinstein's wife, Georgina Chapman.
Yes. I mean, I think we've seen many times over the years, Tina, where maybe the wife is the last person to know what her partner might be up to. And I think that Georgina behaved with discretion, and I think was, emotionally obviously devastated, but was very private, was very concerned rightly about her children. And I think it would have been exceptionally unfair to blame Georgina for her husband's behavior.
You know, Anna, you preside over changes in fashion every month, and you're famous for having perfected your own look. The celebrated sunglasses, which I know you've had eye surgery.
I'm legally blind today, so I did have eye surgery yesterday. So
just in time
I need
for
a white
the Met.
stick, actually.
Just in time for the Met. And you're also, you know, famous for having sort of perfected your own sort of uniform, which I you know, look, here you are in your, it's always sort of colourful prints and the big statement glasses and necklace, and you know, the same kind of Manolo shoes. How did you arrive at your own uniform, and is uniform the best solution for working women?
I think that's an entirely personal decision. Tina, I know you have your uniform, and it works very well for you.
Not as well as yours, I have to say, but
and there, you know, other women who, you know, love to be chameleons and to change and surprise us. I mean, it's probably just a very easy decision to think about wearing the same thing every day and not to have to be concerned. But, you know, I think it's a little bit, maybe it's a little bit boring, and it's time to change. I've been thinking a lot about suits recently. So.
Really? Okay, good. I want to see that.
Thank you, the Duchess of Sussex, right?
Absolutely. Speaking of which, I mean, how do you, the new you know, Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, she and Kate, obviously very different styles. What do you think that Meghan is bringing to fashion right now?
Well, I think that she obviously has her own style and has looked fantastic. I thought her choice of Claire for her wedding was amazing. And I think more importantly, you know, obviously her style is fantastic, and she's... I think when she went on that trip to Australia and New Zealand, she was very respectful in choosing a lot of unknown Australian designers to wear, which was great. But I think more importantly, she's really bringing modernity to the royal family in a way that is inspiring. I think the image that I have in my mind, that I think so many people all over the world have in their mind, of the Duchess of Sussex walking down the aisle by herself, you know, that to me was representative of a modern woman. And then looking at her extraordinarily beautiful and proud mother in the pew, to me that symbolized, goodness, this is going to be a different day for the British royal family.
Right. No, it was stunning. Anna, you and I together had lunch with Princess Diana 6 weeks before she died.
Yes.
In the Four Seasons, July 1997. Little did either of us know that, you know, 6 weeks later she would be dead.
But you were smart enough to keep a diary.
Yes, I kept the diary. But what I remember from that lunch was just how much she spoke about loneliness. You know, how terribly lonely she seemed, and how lovingly she spoke about her boys. I mean, what do you remember from that lunch yourself? I mean, did you have any feeling of her unhappiness?
I mean, she looked incredible. First of all, that was the most important thing, and she looked fantastic.
She did.
And I heard that she spent a lot of time deciding what to wear to that particular lunch, and
it was actually a green Chanel
yes,
suit.
and and we talked about how you describe that particular color. Mint, I think we decided.
Yeah.
But actually what I remember her talking about quite a bit, and at other times too, is how the royal family, and obviously it's a different time now, and I think things have completely changed, were not comfortable dealing with the media. And I think that the part of her popularity was that Princess Diana really was so good with the media and was so in tune with them and welcomed them rather than standing back. And in a way she was certainly the first person in the royal family to understand the benefits of that.
Mm-hmm. You had a wonderful moment recently, last year, when you were made a dame, which is a huge honor. I mean, a Dame Commander of the British Empire, I think is the full title, which was bestowed upon you by Queen Elizabeth. And she then dropped into this fashion show where you were sitting together. I love that picture. It's my favorite viral moment. I'd love just to call up the picture of that with the Queen. What was it like when the Queen just sort of plonked herself down next to you? I know that when I got my CBE from the Queen, she said to me, "Are you here or over there now?"
Well, I can't do the accent as well as you, but what she and I discussed how long we had both been in our jobs.
Yeah, that would definitely be a point of contact. Oh, God. So The fashion world is currently mourning the death of Karl Lagerfeld, and I know what a deep friend of his you were. What do you miss most about Karl?
Well, was no one like Karl. I mean, he was just a completely exceptional person. I mean, he was a linguist, he was an historian, he was a designer, he was a decorator, he was a philanthropist, he was a humanitarian, he was witty, he was wicked, he was, the best kind of friend to have. He was incredibly generous and incredibly kind, and he was this larger-than-life figure that I think that we all need to inspire the world. It was very poignant for me when we lost him, and I was in London, and I had to get on a flight very early the next morning to go to Milan for a press conference, and I was sitting there reading, all the obituaries in the British papers and international media, and there was a very unfashioned type gentleman next to me, like check shirt and, obviously probably a businessman, and I just suddenly started to bawl. I mean, really bawl. And he was so lovely. He just reached into his pocket and he just kept giving me handkerchiefs. And then at the end, I thought I must say something, because he never said a word. I have to say something. And I said, thank you for being so very kind. And he said, Madame, the world has lost a great figure. And to me, that was someone who was not involved in our world, and he felt the loss. And I feel like the whole world felt the same way. I mean, Karl was this force.
Yes, he certainly was, and you lost someone else who you love very much recently too, the Franca Sozzani. Yes. The legendary editor of Italian Vogue. She was another wonderful life force, woman with such brio and attack and flair and all the rest of it. And she was only in her 60s. And of course, your two families now have a very special connection, because your daughter, Bea, married her son.
Yes, well, Franca and I actually started work at Condé Nast the very same week. So we grew up at Condé Nast together, and we sort of circled each other a little bit at the beginning, but over the years we became incredibly close friends, and very much like Karl, she was a very, from a personal perspective, she was a very private person. But we did spend a lot of time, a lot of dinners together, talking about our children, and it wasn't until, and they knew each other since they were 16. Franca, for a while, actually even lived across the street from us. But it wasn't until, I guess, 3 years ago that I think I asked Francesco to come to the Met and sat him with Bea's table, that they connected in a new way. And what was so magical for me, and I think particularly for Bea and for Francesco, before we lost Franca, she really did know that they were to be married, and she, I think, was given a lot of comfort with that towards the end.
I mean, it's an amazing union in that sense. I hesitate to ask you the hackneyed question about how women kind of, how you juggled your own hugely powerful career and being a mother to your two children. I do remember how stunning it was when you were, 6 months pregnant, and you went to edit British Vogue, which came up as an opportunity. And I remember we were both pregnant at the same time, and I was in the elevator with you thinking, how can you have that little tiny bulge under that Chanel suit? Well, I'm like, 190 pounds here. But I was also just very sort of impressed at your dynamism, that you felt, even though you were that pregnant and David, your husband, was living still in New York, you were going to go over and do this thing in London.
Yes, well, I had always had a dream to one day edit British Vogue, so it was an opportunity that I couldn't resist. But I had been there for a while, and I was actually pregnant with my second child, Bea, and I was having dinner like a week, maybe 5 days before I was due to give birth with Victoria Newhouse and Cy Newhouse. And Cy just looked at me and he said, well, what are you doing this summer, Anna? And I said, well, actually, I'm having a baby next week. He hadn't even noticed. So.
I love that. Yeah, those were the days when we just didn't talk about it.
No, I think he genuinely didn't notice.
He just genuinely didn't notice. That's hysterical. Obviously, so obviously one of the other great things about your career, gosh, we're running out of time, but I just want to ask you, you've been an amazing fundraiser for the Democratic Party, and my God, I mean, you were, I think, one of the, I think you were the third biggest bundler for Obama, I was told, which is really astounding. And then, of course, you went on to raise for Hillary Clinton, who I gather you took to see Fleabag the other night,
I did,
right?
and she loved it. I was so nervous that it would be too raunchy for her, but she was, she thought it was fantastic.
So you and she are now going to see Fleabag, but meanwhile we have Donald Trump as president.
Yes, not for long.
Yeah, that's a bad exchange. What do you think of the new crop of candidates, just quickly? Who do you see, who's really lighting your fire right now? And any of the women particularly, I might add,
well, Tina, I'm looking forward to the post-label generation. Maybe it'd be Izzy's kids or B's kids, or hopefully before, when we don't have to label our candidates because it's the gay mayor from South Bend or the black female candidate from California. How about they're just great candidates?
Yeah, so true. Yeah, no, we had Stacey Abrams yesterday. She just rocked the house.
Yes.
So you're waiting to see, in short.
Well, I think it's wonderful that there are so many viable candidates. I personally hope that the decision on who the Democratic candidate will be doesn't take too long, because I am convinced that Trump is already, fueling his war chest. He's, I'm sure, spending a lot of money on digital advertising and probably voter suppression and many other things. So I think that the sooner that we can find the right candidate, and to be honest, whoever is the candidate, I will support. As
you're going to raise money
for, because we have to win.
Absolutely. Okay, Anna. Last question before we close. You once said that you would not ever invite Donald Trump back to the Met Ball. Anything he could do to get back?
Absolutely nothing.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Wonderful to talk to you.